atbildēs. Jā, mums vajag. Greatness is coming. Mēģināšu. Viss vēl darbojas, ne? Tā. Komentārus beigās saņemšu to telefonu vai? Ok, super, jā. Ok, jā. Showtime. Hello, all of the viewers. This is the first RBS podcast called Bottom Line Studio. And today we have Pauls, which I will introduce later. But first I'll explain who I am and what is this podcast about. So I am a Riga Business School first year Bachelor of Business Administration student. And I do have some experience as a moderator previously. For example, I have moderated multiple events in my previous school, which was Talsi State Gymnasium, and that was the school where I also, together with my fellow students basically, we created a podcast of our very own, a student-made content called Turnis, and that's the place where I also was the moderator. Another thing I want to mention is that it is a true honor to be a part of this project. And even though I've only been in Riga Business School for a few months now, I do feel a deep emotional attachment to it. So about the RBS podcast, according to the creators of it. As this is our first live broadcast from Bottom Line Studio, let me start with why. Why RBS has started Bottom Line Studio and will run it till the June of 2022 and even more. This summer, Riga Business School was running stakeholder surveys to receive the insights and feedback. Summarizing more than 45 interviews, it was concluded that our alumni are the best proof of the quality of business education you can get at RBS. With all the international faculty, programs, and the network. So we aim to build the stage to our alumni as they leave the impact and footprint via organizations they work for or own. They successfully lead organizations through technologies that are especially important these days. So RBS community decided to invite 3 moderators, lucky me to be one of them, to host 12 talks with the great alumni of RBS. We concluded that the experience, life hacks, reflections given by RBS alumni are among the best gifts we can give to society. To remind the effort behind the success, and also embrace the commitment you need to achieve something. The next podcast, I want to remind you, will be next week with our moderator Elina, and after that, in the 6th of January, will be with moderator Greg. But now, I want to introduce Pauls Pērkons. So today is our first case study, which is about developing a career in a startup that turned into a global company. So, I want to talk about Pauls a little bit briefly, and then I'll let him explain his words about him. So I would describe Pauls as a person who has achieved remarkable success in a relatively short period of time during his work time in Httpool. I met him as a guest lecturer in one of our marketing lectures, and I was blown away by the story of how he got to where he is today and the knowledge he has about the industry he works in. So that's why I wanted him to be the first guest. So, Pauls, I have a little surprise for you. So we actually contacted Paul Zabers and asked him to describe you in one sentence or two. So he described you like this. Pauls is an absolute beast. He has it all. Enormous work capacity and ethic, like executing flawlessly tasks related to student union and alumni mentoring, or being the first one to jump into crazy adventures like going to Belarus. This man is unstoppable. So, Pauls, I want to ask you, what do you think about his feedback, and who is Andris Zabers to you?
He was a course mate of mine. So we had a lot of interesting times. So yeah, and we still keep in contact. He's now more in the banking area,
Okay.
and also a great person. Yeah, and it's kind of funny also that my colleagues here in the Nordics are also calling me the machine. I don't know if it's related to work or to after work activities. I'm still not sure, but it's a fun connection. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Okay, Paul, so I want you to describe yourself in a few sentences. If someone were to just met you, how would you describe yourself?
Not sure if a few sentences, but in a couple of words, maybe intense and then very fidgety. You could say that. I tend to jump around the topics a lot, and it's hard to keep me focused on one thing. That's one of the things maybe I have in a problem, and trying to maybe too much multitasking. That's maybe a couple of things I deal with on a daily basis.
I'm actually surprised because when we had our talk previously, before this, I was surprised how you could talk to me. We were discussing things and simultaneously you were writing something else. So I'm surprised of how well you can multitask. That's like, I didn't think that's possible. So, but that's just an observation.
Yeah, well, it works until it doesn't, you know. Nothing's perfect, and I'm just used to, having 20, 30 tabs at the same time open, and always, you have to work something in one time, and then basically switch from one to another. And I typically have the thing whenever I get an email or whatever, I try to finish it within those 5 minutes, or within those 5 minutes try to understand where it should be heading, and then I just have the mentality that if I'm going to leave for an hour, it's probably going to be left for a week, and then it's not going to be done. So that's sort of what I try to stick to, and so far, at least it works. It brings a lot of stress and then a lot of problems with that, but while it works, at least it's good.
Okay, well, I'll actually want to come back to this later. But I want to ask you, in your words, explain what is Httpool and what is your role in it? What do you do?
Yeah, so basically what we do as a company, we help businesses, advertisers, agencies scale their business globally. So let's say you are let's say a person just opening their Shopify store, they want to run some ads on Facebook. Of course, they can do that themselves. They have no issues with that. But when you go into marketing budgets of, let's say, 1K per day, 5K per day, 100K per day, this is when you start getting into the requirement of more support. You get into the requirement of, hey, maybe I need a custom agreement, maybe I need custom payment terms. And there's a lot more things that go into that, starting from policy to best practices to creatives and all of this. And these are the things that normally all these different media platforms such as Facebook, such as Twitter, etc. provide, but most of them have their main offices, let's say, typically in the UK or US, and it's easier for them to take us on as partners to cover all those, let's say, smaller markets rather than go into them themselves. As basically we are already located throughout all of our holdings companies, I think somewhere around 100 markets maybe. We have a lot of local experience, and basically if you have, let's say if you're a company trying to go, for example, globally, we have all of these offices we can reach out to understand maybe, hey, what's the best local creative practices there? What's the difference culturally there? And these are the things that we can take to our advantage. So basically we allow these companies to do something in a sense that would be harder to do for the Facebooks, the Twitters, the Googles. And at the same time, since we are this, let's say, neutral player in the market, since we are, let's say, connected to all these platforms, we can give a bit different insight than all these platforms could give themselves. So we kind of see it all from a bird's eye view, and we are able to also support these advertisers not only from the view of the platform, but also building our internal tools above that, additional consultancy services, let's say, looking at the whole picture, and basically things that are not, let's say, just related to these platforms. Okay. So our goal is basically for these companies to be able to have a reliable partner that's not, let's say, 5 different partners or 6 ones, like when you have to advertise on all these platforms, that can achieve all you should be requiring basically to go globally.
Okay. And what is your position?
Yeah, so I myself am here as a Twitter Performance Director, and I'm basically my goal and my job is to oversee the regions for Twitter Performance clients. So basically we're focusing on clients that are, let's say, not so much the traditional brands, not so much focusing on long-term brand strategy, but looking specifically at this typically performance where you see the results in day 1, day 2, and where there's a lot of fluctuation happening in basically how these campaigns are managed. There's a lot of action, let's say, going on, and we are the ones who are specifically specializing in this area, which is, let's say, not what Twitter is known for. So this is one of our, let's say, selling points for Twitter. And then what I'm, let's say, my day-to-day tasks, so as I said, I'm kind of overseeing the region. What this means, it's basically I'm trying to jump around a lot of things, which is why I have to also do this multitasking, and why I'm trying to basically, most of my day goes through these, trying to lit out fires or try to support all these different countries we are working in. And we have also our team here based in, mainly, currently at least, based here in Riga, which supports specifically these advertisers on these tips, troubleshooting, campaign management, best practices. And they are the ones currently doing most of the magic, let's say.
Okay. So could you briefly, in a few sentences, describe what is your connection with RBS?
Yeah, so I finished my bachelor studies here, I think something like 3 years ago or so. Basically, I got my agreement, I think, signed at Httpool the day I was presenting my bachelor's, something like that. And yeah, basically the stars aligned. I think it was the time when Frank was just coming into Latvia, and I was the first employee, at least in our company, from there. And our regional managing director also finished RBS, so there was some level of connection at least there. But those were completely, of course, different times.
Okay.
So yeah.
So we have a few questions that we ask every guest, and one of them is related to leadership. So I want you to describe your understanding of leadership. How would you define it?
I mean, probably if you Google, it would be like something leading people or something like that. But yeah, the way I see it basically is that it's whether the company, the people, the management, and its ability basically to, let's say, make the employees believe in not just the brand, not just the product, but the actual company itself. So let's say when you're just getting to the job market and you go into the startup, you're probably gonna, let's say, you might have the belief in the product, you might have the belief in the idea, but when you're actually on board and you want to stay there long term, the leadership, the trust that the company gives you, the transparency, this is basically what gives you this trust within the company, what keeps you there long term. And then this ability to the people to believe in the company, I'd say this is what is this leadership, let's say, in the broader picture.
Okay. And the other question I want to ask you is related to technology. So what technological tools or apps help you in your everyday life in terms of productivity? What do you use? Maybe something.
Honestly speaking, I don't use that much or close to nothing now. As I said, I'm testing a lot of things on the go. I like reading a lot about technologies, about new ways how to automate stuff. Okay. But most of these things never really stick to me. So I typically tend to try them out, but rarely I keep something more than a month. What I do for now, at least, I try to basically, in the way how I manage my day, I try to have, let's say, whatever I do is on my calendar. Whatever is not on my calendar is typically a long-term thing, and then it's in my task book. That's the main thing I'm trying to keep as a practice. And then on short-term tasks, as I said, like if it's under 5 minutes, under 10 minutes, that's what I call like a short-term task. If everything else is long-term, that's what I basically try to handle on the go. So, as I said, not much actual like apps or tools I use. I've tried a lot of things to help with like sleep, managing everything from weight to hormones to whatever. But none of them really, I don't know, got me kicking for long term. And I'd say the only thing like that actually benefits like long term and in the way how you work is specifically like min-maxing these smaller tasks, let's say. So a lot of people focus on these, let's say, these 5 things you do maybe 5 times per day or something like that, and trying to basically optimize them through these tasks. What I think is like a better benefit is just trying to learn how to use, like, I don't know, learn general Google, learn how to better use that through all these search terms, same with emails, and like actually focus on the things that might give you some maybe some seconds off of things you do 100 or 1,000 times per day, rather than these huge increases on something you might be only doing 1 to 5 times per day. I used to do gaming a lot. Then when you're playing MMO games, you had like a lot of people had these mouses which had like 10 buttons on the side or something like that. So I was playing around with macros at one time, and like I actually had a mouse where I had like VLOOKUP and Excel macros there on the mouse at one point. So I was testing out how you can sort of try to mimic the way how you approach, I don't know, min-maxing in gaming, try to get the best gear, and how you can approach that sort of in your either personal life or in your business goals.
Wow, the way you describe what you do, you're a really time-efficient person. That's like basically how I would describe you. I mean, there's not a lot of people like you in terms of how rigidly you schedule everything. For example, I don't think a lot of people actually try to do those little things as much as possible and save the total time spent in the long term. So I think that's really interesting. What I want to ask you next is, what is your biggest failure or a learning lesson that you gained after that?
Honestly, I think like most of the issues I actually get is specifically due to all this multitasking and taking on more than I can handle. I usually go in a lot of cycles through like overworking and then like not being able to work. So let's say going to these cycles of getting burnout. And this is like, I've previously when I just started working and like starting doing everything, I never even, let's say, looked at, for example, focus time, which is popular now in a lot of startups. Let's say you set aside a couple of hours per day when you just focus on your tasks, nobody can bug you and all this. And I was never really looked at that as something I needed until I had a time when I was like consistently like 2 to 3 months in a row, basically had like 9 to 6 meetings, and then I could only start my work at like 6 p.m. And this was basically when I really was like, hey, I might actually need this focus time. And this is basically when I started considering, okay, maybe what companies are doing, such as like 1 day in a week when you don't have any meetings or stuff like this, is actually really beneficial. Not so much even about productivity, but your mental health. And this is something that I think is overlooked a lot nowadays. I think it's good and interesting that people start talking about this a lot more in general, like mental health. And I think this should be advocated a lot more, like same therapy and all that.
Okay. But from a learning lesson, is there a meaningful one, like a specific one that has impacted you in your life and the way did it change your perspective? Is there like some kind of that learning lesson of that nature?
The main perspective changing thing I had was when I just started basically working. I know a lot of people get anxious about it and thinking that probably everyone who's above me is really knowledgeable and all that. And then when you start actually working with a lot of agencies and a lot of companies, you realize they know jack shit. And then that's pretty much the main thing that was new to me. And that's also like when I got a lot more less stressful and a lot more at ease, when you know that probably they either know less than you or not enough, and then you can also play around that. One thing I've noticed, for example, is when I was previously also working in an IT company, I know people in IT have this specificality. They like to use abbreviations a lot. They like to squeeze them in everywhere. And then when now I'm talking also to a lot of companies, that I can see it basically that whenever people start like squeezing them in everywhere, and then you can basically ask them about it, you understand that either they speak super generally and they really don't know the topic, or they actually know the topic and then they're going to be super happy to talk about it. So either they feed their ego or you know how to play around them.
Oh, okay. So I want to now actually start talking about our main study case, which was developing a career in a startup, and that turned into a global company. So I want you to start with actually the core question. How would you describe your experience during this period? Like, where did it start? How did you, I remember you said that you joined Httpool in your bachelor's the same day, right?
Basically when I finished it, yeah.
Okay, so how was it like when you joined? How did people treat you? What was your experience? And how did that evolve over time? How did that grow?
Yeah. So what I said basically about this leadership topic, that I think the most important part was this trust and transparency, and this is what like the one thing I got here from day one when I joined. Like I was aware that I was basically like a nobody there and somebody who didn't know that anything in that area. But even so, like whenever I had some kind of new initiative from day one, like what we started in our first, for example, weeks, was that we understood that our morning, let's say, stand-up meetings are taking too much time of our day. We get carried on about stuff, and then I was actually starting to monitor basically how much time we spend in the meetings, how much time people are talking, like actually having a timer with me and looking and talking to people about, hey, you shouldn't go off track. You shouldn't talk about relatable stuff to this. And that basically, this idea, since it was like it came out of good thought, and basically it was the idea was meant to actually improve our lives. It was met with a lot of positive responses, and this was something maybe I wasn't used to, as I was basically a nobody there. And I think this was the main important part that I was treated as a somebody without any kinds of experience, and at the same time also like I felt like I just had one of the still most knowledgeable people around me. I had one of the best people who could train me there. And rarely in companies, whether small or large, a lot of people will still not want to find the free time to train somebody or put in the effort to actually get somebody from A to Z fully going, let's say. And this is something I really got here, and one of the reasons why I still see it as a really good company to stay at. And this hasn't actually changed. When we were in Httpool Baltics, we were 15 people, and where now we're, I don't know, like 150, something like that. And I think this is the most important part. You still keep this, let's say, this helpfulness throughout, regardless how large a large company is. So we have, like, across our group, I think over 1,000 people now, and that's the thing, that if I shot up a random email to somebody in a different country who I haven't spoken to before, like, it's a 90% chance he's going to answer me, help me the same day, most likely. And this is something that's really hard to find, I think, nowadays.
The 150 people you mentioned, they're the amount of people that are in Latvia?
This is in the Baltics. This is what we call the Baltics. So we are sort of split into regions. Our sort of small region, which we collaborate with more closely, this is the Baltics, Poland, Nordics, as well as Ukraine now. So this is sort of the smaller region within which we operate in.
Okay.
When we just started, it was 15 people. This was just Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia.
Okay. Wow. You mentioned that you have a lot of people you cooperate with, and you are the director and you manage a team. And also, while I was talking to you before this, you said that you had the challenge of having to deal with a horizontal structure within the company.
Yeah, so that's the point. It's kind of hard to explain because we have a lot of different offices, we have a lot of different products, plus we have a lot of cross-functional teams. And that's the point. There's not a lot of people over each other. We're all in different layers. And then for all this, let's say, managing and dealing with the team, I have an amazing team lead who does a lot of that, somebody I couldn't trust more. And that's also something that really helps me out. But like, as I said, I'm cooperating a lot with all the different countries. I'm speaking directly to all the people, the salespeople within those countries. I'm speaking with all the, let's say, the teams in Latin America, the teams in the MENA region. And then my goal is sort of to try to understand what's the most important, let's say, opportunities there, what's the ways how we can maybe solve some bottlenecks, or if there's, let's say, a fire to sort of solve, then be there to jump in, let's say, in 10 minutes time and any kind of call and try to fix something. Okay. So as I said, it's kind of hard to explain just because we have those different teams, but let's say for a regular person just managing campaigns, even though you might be in this small team working with just a bunch of people, there's still like you're still cooperating with, like, let's say, extra 30 people on a monthly basis who you might not see every month, but they're still in your life somehow, whether it's, let's say, with analytics, whether it's with general strategy, basically people you have ad hoc requests with.
Okay. I want to go, actually now I want to build on the fact that you said that you're really time efficient, and I want to know how you deal with that. So my question to you is, how do you deal with, you kind of mentioned this, but how do you deal with, I want to say, burnout? So you're in the company that is rapidly growing, that is rapidly changing. You have new tasks assigned rapidly as well, and you mentioned that you have a rigorous like work ethic, and you have to basically be on top of your game all the time. So there's probably points where you burn out. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, that's the point I'm saying. It happens pretty much on a consecutive basis, not like I'm able to get away from that still.
Yeah.
So, and then that's something I'm still trying to deal with, because I have a bit of toxic personality with that. I usually have either my laptop with me at all times. I have my emails, everything on the phone, and that's typically the first thing I check in the morning. That's something I always do during the day, and then also at night. And then that's just like, as I said, like I'm typically trying to answer everything in this 5 to 10 minute time window, as if possible, if there's not like calls at the same time or something like that. And it's not like I have to always do everything myself. It's just about understanding who might be the right person for this, who might be the right person to delegate, who might be the right person to forward this. So this is a lot of, let's say there's a lot of these tasks that don't require that much mental stress, which makes it a bit less, let's say, of an issue that I have to perform in a way. But yeah, I definitely go through these cycles when it's harder to, let's say, get the energy to get up in the morning and do that from 9 to whatever.
Okay, but
and yeah, I can continue. As I said, I'm not really dealing with it good, and that's the point. That there are periods when I'm tired, and I'm just understanding that these things happen. It's normal, especially now. It's normal for everyone, and you just need to understand that this is a time that's gonna come to an end. It's gonna be better in the future, and try to focus more on, like, let's say, fix my sleep, go more to the gym, and get the energy somehow where I wouldn't be able to do that otherwise. What helps me, for example, during the days also is. I don't normally eat like much, either lunch or breakfast. Whenever I have the hour free without meetings during the day, I try to either go to the gym or something like that. That's how I get my energy boost then. And that's at least what helps me get through the other part of the day and then not feel like I'm dragging it out.
Okay. I imagine, like, if your everyday is like this, then when you have the holidays, how do you actually relax? Like, during those holidays, do you go all in on them? Is what I'm asking. Like,
well,
when you have them.
My girlfriend usually makes me, so that's a partial reason to that. But ideally, it's hard for me actually to get away from it. I want to, because I want to be sort of on top of it. I don't like being controlling, but I like to be aware of what's happening, and then I like to be there if there's something to fix that is urgent.
So you're actually disconnected.
I at least, yeah. So I try to check everything once per day. That's that's how much I try to at least go away from it. I only check once per day. And whatever is basically not urgent, that I leave for after the vacation. Whatever is urgent, I try to fix it during those, let's say, half an hour per day or something.
Okay. So, about the growth of the company, how did you feel the transition of when, I don't think you mentioned this, but you were the 15th employee, right?
In our region, basically.
In our region, okay. How did you feel the transition when this startup became to grow large? Do you feel that internal, like, kind of stress? How did you adapt, or what new responsibilities you had?
I mean, the thing is with like all these startups, you're always doing more that's in your job description, so you don't quite feel all this transition in terms of what you do. It's more about all these external things that are happening. So as I said, now we have those different other teams, and now there's a lot of different other processes you need to implement. There's a lot of other different teams you need to help, which are going to help you in the future, but you need to start doing it now. And these are the things that we, of course, tried to start doing when we were earlier, but it's, I guess it's some of them, like there's still the process takes longer than you wish. Sometimes there's not the resources to do that. And then they sort of get delayed until you're too big, and then it becomes a pain in the ass to put into place then. So I'd say it's a lot of this happens sort of organically, just because you're still working within your like smaller team. You don't really see what's happening around you. Now with COVID and not a lot of people being in the office, then it's like you go to your spot and then you see that, hey, that's a new phase, that's a new phase, that's a new phase, that's maybe something new, but that's new for everyone. That's not like something out of ordinary now. So yeah, as I said, like when you're working within this smaller team, you're sort of still communicating with the same bunch of people. It's just like there's a lot of different other areas, like as I said, horizontally they're growing, and you don't really see them until you need them. And then when you need them, somebody connects you, and then it's just like, hey, I have a new person to talk to. That's nice. Previously, I didn't have that.
But in general, you had the amount of people you had to report to became larger, right? That amount of people.
In a way, like I still report to the same amount of people. That's the point. With us being that horizontal, there's not a lot of people we actually report to. It's more about helping each other, and the people. If the mentality is there, if people are reciprocative of that, then I think it comes naturally.
Okay.
Because for us also, like that's the point. We work sort of as a regional team, as a global team. We're not focusing only on our markets within our team. And that's the point. When we're focusing, we're not trying to steal anything away from something. We're not trying to only help some people. Our goal is to make the company bigger. Whatever that comes from, whatever country it comes from, whichever region it comes from. Basically, we just look at the size of the opportunity, and that's where we help. So, and then this, let's say, didn't change if we were 20 or if we were 100. Basically, the opportunities that were there is just that, like, we still reached out one-to-one, depending on who was in charge of that, let's say.
Okay, so the organization still remained intact.
In a sense, yeah.
Okay.
Of course, now, yeah, a lot of these processes are starting to, there's starting to be this requirement of putting them into place, and then this is mainly due to this growing, this is maybe something that came on top. So let's say when you're smaller, when you're working with less people in general, a lot of these, actually we were already putting these processes within the team, but whenever the teams start to get like more of them, then it's a bit harder just because each one of them works in their own way. And whenever you're making kind of larger mergers and acquisitions, whenever you have new partnerships coming in, this is when you need to in the future start to align all of this together. And that's basically the more complicated part when you already have like different teams that have been working in their own way for between, I don't know, 1 to 5 years. And then you suddenly need to understand that, hey, this is the way we need to switch to. And of course, you still need to listen to them. You still need to collaborate and try to understand what can we take from them, what can we give them, sort of in a way. So it's not like it's being enforced. It still happens, let's say, through communication. We still try to interact with each other and then try to find let's say, a healthy medium where we can stick to.
Okay. I want to elaborate on your experience on being a manager, because you've been a manager for 1 year so far, right? The
Pretty
director.
much. And then,
okay.
And then that's the point. It's kind of funny that, as I said, like I have a team under me and a manager under me who manages the team. And as I said, like I couldn't be happier that she's there, because she's like the best person I could see fit for that. And that's the point that when we have this, the way how we work, it's not so much, let's say, managing for me specifically. It's more about overseeing and seeing where can I fit in to help. That's the point.
Okay,
so also like with realistically speaking, like there hasn't been a lot of conflicts for us, and all of them like which have been relatively minimal and solvable within a week to a day. So that's the point. I haven't really actually gone through these struggles that I should have gone through. So that's probably somewhere in the future.
Okay, so you're not exactly a manager. You don't actually, you assign them tasks, right?
Yeah, exactly. But I'd say the hierarchy is a bit different than, let's say, maybe in traditional companies.
Did you have to apply the organizational behavior course you had in RBS in there in any way? Did you that kind of?
I personally don't think about the theory much. I'm more into, let's say, testing out things early and understanding what fails and what doesn't. So this is the same thing, like the same approach as you had at 15 people are not going to work for when you're 150 people. And this is why I say it's more about being able to quickly test out where are the options, which options work and which options don't work, and then just understand which is the way how we proceed. And this goes with anything, whether it's communication, whether it's internal processes, whether it's how we handle disputes. And as I said, like this theory of course helps. Theory from, let's say, practice from other companies help, but at the end of the day, you operate in your own way and you need to understand what works for you. So yeah, I honestly don't focus that much on theory. Yes, of course, I Google what other people are doing, what maybe works, start with that, and then try to adapt it to what we think works for us.
Okay. In general, what was the most difficult transition in it? Because before last year, right? Like before this year when you were a manager, what was the transitions like when you basically had someone assign you tasks to now you also are assigned tasks, but you also have to manage other people? Like how did your workflow change of what you had to do?
Yeah, that's the
how
point.
Did you feel
like,
that?
So as I said, in one sense, like when we had these cross-functional teams, I was still assigning tasks to others. So it's just like that. Of course, yeah, I wasn't their manager or anything like that. But I don't think it's changed that much. So yeah, I'd say it was more or less the same in all these scenarios. That like, as I wasn't assigned tasks at that stage, I'm still being assigned them now. I'd say the harder part for me was like when I'm trying to get more away from this hands-on technical work. So it was kind of like fighting to let go, and then this was maybe something I didn't want to do them that much. Of course, it's still like it's a bit different work, but I want to still be somewhat like in there doing all this dirty work just to know what's going on, and I want to be able to, let's say, relate to everyone.
Okay. So basically, you had to always work with other people, right?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I think everyone works for other people in some level.
But so wait.
I think maybe I can expand on that. Like, that's the point why companies have these visions and goals, and when you have this assigned common goal, it's not so much about assigning tasks, but more about how can we find a way out to, let's say, make this better for all of us. And when it's not exactly like when you say it's a task, I think most of the people assume tasks are more like dreadful things you want to avoid. But when it's something that benefits both of them, it's not like it's something you have to do. It's something you want to do because you know it's going to help you. Okay. It's a bit about a different approach, I think.
So about that part, I want to elaborate on that negotiation. You had to learn to negotiate from the very beginning, basically. And what kind of tips would you, or what kind of things that work for you were, like during the negotiation, what was the, maybe not step by step, but the general ideas that you think about when you try to negotiate with other people, and what do you recommend other people to think about while they're negotiating in general?
I mean, it depends on the task, of course, but I'd say the main thing is just trying to understand what you want to get out of this. Yeah, it depends on what kind of negotiations you're talking about. If it's like internally, when it's about these tasks and stuff like this, it's more about having sort of a structure in place and having a process, trying to understand what's the end goal.
Okay, but about a client, for example, if you have a client, what about that sort of negotiation? Do you first listen to what he has to say? Like, what's that?
Yeah, well, we work in consultative sales, which is that we basically listen to the client and try to understand which are the goals that need to be fulfilled. We don't really just try to blindly sell everything just to get money out of it. So as I said, like the way our company works is that like if this advertiser of this company grows, then we grow as well. So it's against our, let's say, incentive to try to just blindly sell. We are more interested in this long-term cooperation, and this is why our focus is specifically on understanding their business, understanding what works for them, then basically coming back with where can we fit this middle ground, what can we offer, and then trying to work together with them. So we're working more like partners with our clients in that sense, where that's the point where we're managing, let's say, their campaigns. We, let's say, integrate ourselves in as an additional employee of theirs, and we're trying to find these, let's say, win-win solutions for them. Okay. And this only starts always with understanding first how they work, what they want, and without that information, we can't just sell them anything, basically.
Okay. And my final question about this exact case study is, what advice would you give to people who are considering where to start their career, maybe, or just transition to a company? What would you recommend them consider if they're choosing between let's say, at this point, global company or a startup? Because yes, Httpool turned into a global company, but you started in a startup version of it. So what would you recommend the decision to be? Like, what should they look at and consider? Yeah,
so I previously was kind of also for a short period of time working in a company that would be, let's say, treated as a more larger company in terms of all these processes and all that. And I think the main thing is also to take away of this is when you are already working in a larger, let's say, more hierarchical company, there should already be all these processes in place, like onboarding, like HR, like how things should be done. And those are the things you can afterwards take away from this large company to a startup that, hey, you should probably start implementing these in the early days so that you don't have to do them when it's too late. And just understanding how these are implemented in larger companies can help you afterwards if you're moving the other way around. And when you are going to the startup, I think in the other way is that you will probably have a lot more freedom than larger companies, and this freedom will give you the way, let's say, the ability to experiment you wouldn't gain otherwise. So be bold, ask a lot of questions, and I think this goes everywhere. I think this was also my personal issue when it just started. I was asking too little questions. People don't want to be bugging others, but this is what helps you grow. This is what helps you understand, and then never be afraid to do that. And then so yeah, basically try to abuse that you get this possibility to experiment around. That abuse that you get this ability to fail and adapt from that. And then this is something we're probably not gonna that easily, at least, get in a larger company.
Okay, so this is the end of the case study. It was wonderful, but do we have any questions from the audience? Okay. So, from the viewer, what is the most valuable thing or subject you learned during your studies in RBS that helps you in your career right now?
One thing was, let's say, interesting for me also in the way I approach this. Well, of course, there's one part which is these connections, outside of study things. But yeah, when you go through all these different courses, I was specifically at that time also sort of interested in marketing and starting working for marketing. And when you get this, let's say, theory on one side, and when you're actually working for a company and you see practice on the other side where it's completely different from the theory, that's also sort of interesting to, first of all, note that not everything is according to theory and not everything is the same way, but also does give you just a different point of view how to look at things. That basically, it gives you a starting point from from where should you start Googling to learn actually what works for you, what are the things that other people do, and just basically gives this approach on how to, let's say, how to look at things in general.
Okay, so a lot of what the professors emphasize here, that RBS teaches you how to think and not specifically the subjects. They give you the fundamentals, but what they most importantly teach you is how to think. So do you also agree with that? Like what you've taken from RBS mostly was the ability to think and analyze and critical thinking?
In a way, I think personally, like all this theory when it comes specifically to marketing, it changes from year to year. It changes from 3 months to 6 months, and that's something you can't really in time prepare for a course. And this is why it's a lot more valuable to teach in like which direction you should look yourself rather than just try to blindly put it in your head. And then in that sense, yeah, I think the theory was there. The theory helped you like understand a lot how other businesses are approaching it. But it's, yeah, like this is what you have. You should take that with a grain of salt and basically take that knowledge with you and understand how to basically where to go from there. And then like understand what could be the direction you need to go in. So let's say if you're going to, for example, a startup, then let's say these are the things you learned, what were people doing in big corporation, but then you can start Googling around, okay, what maybe they did in the early days, why did they transition to this stage at some point, and basically try to understand the big picture just from this theory.
Okay, so you get a fundamental understanding from which you can then build.
In a way, yeah.
Okay. So I want to ask you about your funniest or best memory from studying in RBS.
Honestly, can't remember a lot of them, but yeah.
Or at least one of them was funniest because maybe it's hard to think of the best one.
Yeah, it's hard to think of the best. Oh, well, there were some studies where I was playing video games during the lecture, and the lecturer stopped me and said that I was playing the different video game. And I got pissed that it's not that video game.
Okay. What would you recommend to people? What kind of people would you recommend to study in RBS?
I think like the main thing would be to understand prior you start your studies, like in which direction you want to go. Like in general, since RBS studies this business in general, like you can still go in all directions, whether it's finance, whether it's marketing, whether it's sales, and in that sense, like just everybody who's going like who's willing basically to go in those directions and needs this sort of this general, let's say, this theoretical knowledge or sense that they need this before they go into work. So as I said, the one thing that I was like afraid in a sense of when I started was this, that everybody's probably a lot smarter than me, everyone's done this for a lot longer time, and this can also help for those people that, hey, this theory might give you this confidence also, like maybe it's more of a mental thing as well.
Okay, we have one final question from the audience. Anya, what is the one thing you would encourage each student to try during their study years in this school?
Probably doing a lot of things on the side, because like studies are one thing, but it's you still need the practical knowledge, like whether it's the same student union or student association or whatever it's called, whether it's as I said, like even in business now, there's still, you can do a lot on the creative side, on design side, on tech, and these are a lot of things you can still study on the side. You can still go through courses, and basically, I don't know, put a couple of dollars in, open your own Shopify store, put some money in on Facebook ads. I don't know, like understand these things, that what you like, what you don't like, and just so that once you come out, you have this actual like practical knowledge. Maybe in parallel, you've already taken something on the theoretical side from studies itself, and then you can already go outside as basically as a new person, and not just with some theoretical knowledge, but also with some actual practical applications. You don't have to go to a legitimate job to get this, basically.
Okay. And with that note, we'll close off this podcast. So I want to remind you that the next podcast will be next week next week, this exact time and date, Thursday, 16 o'clock or 4 p.m. in Riga time, with the moderator Elena. And then after that, we'll have in 6th of January with the moderator Greg. So we hope you enjoyed the first podcast of Riga Business School's podcast, Bottom Line Studio. Until next time, see you.